All right. Thank you, Kabaz, for taking the time for us to have this conversation. I know we really wanted to have this session with you, but then business had to be taken care of on the day. But thank you so much for making yourselves available for the series, the Lead Out Loud series. So this was meant to be your closing session that we are recording. So welcome again. Thank you for joining us. So on the top, it would be my top left. Possibly the person who would be watching this would be top right. That is Nomfundo and And then I've got the man of the house, Owen Kaba. This is a couple, yes, that's like an obvious thing. This is a couple, they are in business and they have been gracious to spend time with us to actually not talk about the obvious of public speaking, but just the fiber of public speaking, what makes presence, what makes the speech become lasting or impactful. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. Can I just maybe, before I let you guys go into your content, which we will have in a form of a conversation, I want us to do a short icebreaker. So I've got a couple of categories. I know you guys are Toastmasters, so you have invited me several times to listen to you guys do your thing. And so now I'm gonna do what you guys do when you guys are playing with other kids in the field. All right. So you get to choose a category and then I'm going to give you a topic for you to speak for the next 30 to 60 seconds. That's like less than a minute. And you're going to have a speech just so that we are hooked to this conversation. I'll use this as our conversation starter or icebreaker if you would like. All right, let's see. Let's see. Okay. Before you even say hello, I'm gonna go straight to it. All right. Okay, let me read you my categories. I've got leadership and work, I've got personal development, I've got community and society, I've got professional settings, and I've got values and character. Which category would you like to speak about? So each person must choose just one. And then I'm going to give you your topic based on the category you choose.
Sure. Good evening, Mabongi, and thank you so much for having us. We're so excited to be here. I think it's a
Yeah.
trap starting off this way. Wow. But thanks to our Toastmasters training, I think we'll be representing well. Personal development. I'm just, hey, let's start there for me.
Okay, awesome. Okay. Owen, which one would you
Thank
choose?
you. Hey, yeah, no. What a great surprise. I think I love this exercise.
Oh,
Um, I wanted to go for personal development as well. It's a favorite subject of ours at home, but
okay.
leadership and work is also a key passion. So let's try that.
Okay. This is good. So we've got two categories, personal development and leadership and work. Can I start with you, Nomfundo, because you actually answered first. So, ladies first. Personal development. Share a moment you stepped out of your comfort zone. So that would be the topic of your speech. And your 30 to 60 seconds begin now.
Thank you so much. I think as individuals, we are all aware of our personal inclination, and that refers to how we would ordinarily react to different circumstances. Some people refer to themselves as introverts, some extroverts. There are indicators of our inclination based on our personalities and how generally we're perceived. Very often we wear that consistently over a period of time. However, there comes, and it certainly came to me, a personal experience that meant I needed to shift and change what was ordinary. In my case, it was out of frustration, it was out of being deceived, it was out of needing to defend my personal honor. There was an experience where I was accused of something that I did not do. And generally, I am not someone who likes confrontation at all. But because it meant that my personal sort of integrity was at risk, I needed to step up and do something that was uncomfortable for me. I needed to be my own advocate in a sense. I needed to confront the source of the betrayal and deceit. And for the first time in my life, I recognized aspects of confrontation that I didn't know existed. And quite frankly, I'm glad that very specific circumstances of disappointment brought out that strength in me. And that is the day of change. Thank you.
Oh my God. That was such a race. You did go over a minute with just a few seconds, but it was because I was muted and I couldn't stop you. This was brilliant. Oh, I love this. I love this. I love this. Okay. Um, Baba X, it's your turn.
Let's
You
go.
chose leadership and work. Now, why is communication a leadership advantage? Why
Hmm.
is leadership a community? Let me read that correctly. Why is communication a leadership advantage? And your time starts now.
You know what's interesting is that communication was not invented by any human being. Communication was founded on the basis of the connection of all human beings. Communication goes beyond the languages we speak, the nonverbals that we identify between people. Communication has to do with connecting with people. It has to do with identifying the potential that is on the other side of what you see people wearing in their faces, their professions, and what they project out into the world. Now, communication is a very key and fundamental factor to leadership because through communication, you are able then to connect with those you lead. You are able to bring out the best out of them. You are able to usher in a new person that can be able to replace you. I read a book, it's called The Art of War by Sun Tzu. And one of the key principles written there is that you are not a leader if you have not developed people to be able to replace you. Another billionaire friend of mine said something very powerful. He said, leaders make themselves redundant in a good way. That can only take place if you call out destiny out of the human being. And we do that through authentic connection. And that authentic connection is summed up in communication. Thank you.
I feel like you guys had so many hours to prep because, I mean, what was that? I mean, that was so brilliant. You communicated a whole lot of things. Can I just say, from just let me just start with you, Babu Klaba, the background of communication. You laid such beautiful foundation, just based on communication, and then the ending. the impact of it. You dropped it like a bomb because then it just simply answers the question, why is it an advantage? Because leadership is about transforming lives. And so if there is no impact in a human life, that means you haven't really done, leadership, which means as basis for that, communication is fundamental. Oh my goodness.
100%.
Thank you
100%.
so much.
Thank you
And
so
and
much.
and Nomfundo, I'm telling you, from the idea of people understanding who they are and the idea of being falsely accused, really, it does take courage to step out of your comfort zone if you are somebody who would not naturally defend themselves, but you realize that if I keep quiet now, someone could just, move on with a different view of you that is incorrect. Oh my goodness, I can actually relate to that where you were forced by circumstances to step out of your comfort zone. You had nothing, no other option. You had nothing but to step out of your comfort zone. And I think many people would relate to that. Thank you so much for bringing that. Can you tell me, how did you structure your conversations? Like, I mean, I didn't give you a chance. I just said your sentence start now, and already you had, it feels like you were talking and using some form of structure in your talk. Do you want to share that with us? What is it? What is it that you thought about when I dropped that helped you to articulate your thoughts and your reasoning within within what you wanted to communicate?
Thank you so much. I think it's also going to be exciting for Mr. Owen to share because he's a winning speaker in the most literal sense. But very often, when you are speaking, what precedes speaking is listening. So being actively present in a conversation, you are not caught off guard. I mean, yes, obviously you people don't give us their prelude or scripts before engaging us in any circumstance. However, actively being present is the premise of response because you hear what the question is, you allow your mind to process. What's interesting also in the previous session we spoke about the fact that words come from a source. So anytime you communicate, you are genuinely using parts of your experiences and grasping it at what you've read. And I think it's also quite important, Mr. Owen alluded to that also, reading helps. But how I structured this conversation or this response specifically was the fact that there's a source to draw information from, was the fact that I trusted what you were saying to me. You asked a question, and I trusted that the meaning of that is as you were saying it, and I responded authentically to that, drawing from my own personal experience. What was also important is that I keep to answering your ask. So it's not just putting words together, but it's threading a story that is a direct response to what you gave me. So in physics, they say every action has an opposite and equal response. So communication is the same. That is the structure.
Sure. You know what you are reminding me after what you've said is when I would listen to an interview and hear the interviewer ask someone a question, but hear them respond to something that's totally different. Um, and I always just wonder if that person, perhaps they were absent-minded or they didn't get the context of the question. Maybe it needed to be, explained further. I most of the time, but as what you are saying helps me realize that sometimes we are rushing into a conversation without being calm enough to actually listen to what the person is saying without rushing to respond, without rushing to express what we are already feeling. But we are wanting to be in the space where we allow ourselves to be in a conversation where two people are in communication, not you and your perspective, and it feels like you are in two different rooms. So thank you so much for that. Baba X, I'm gonna bring back the same question I asked the first time.
Mm.
How did you come up with such a speech in
The
such a,
structure. Yeah.
yeah, what was it?
No. Thank you so much. I think there's home ground advantage because when you have been exposed and have some experience, I think it's unfair with other kids. They think that you're so good, but actually, you take time and practice. Like you said, we've done these types of exercises before. There's a new subject, but the structure remains the same. The technique remains the same. And so you asked a really good question. So what type of structure do you put in place to then, because what helps a lot is developing a skill of speaking like we write. If you notice, we do a good job at writing because we think about what we write. But sometimes, or most of the time, we do a poor job at speaking because we almost, we want to speak quickly because our brains are working now, and we want to, that's why we keep, we end up, yeah, forgetting what we need to say, and okay, and you end up become in your head like, okay, now I'm thinking about, okay, what's the question again, so what helps is is thinking before speaking, because that's what we do when we write. So a big advantage there is what Mrs. Klaba spoke about in terms of being authentic and being centered and responding, listening carefully and responding genuinely to the question. Because when you speak out of memory, it's better than being creative on the spot. When you speak from heart, when you speak from the center of who you are, it's much better than trying to trying to be correct, trying to say, what would be the most profound thing to say here? What would be the most relevant things to say? But I love the question you asked to Mrs. Klaba and how she responded, because it's a real thing. She had to come out of her comfort zone at some point. And so going back to that center of where do I come from, bring that into being, But another thing that is a structure that helps as a tool, as a technique, almost like a hack, I don't know, maybe we'll use that word, is one reiterating the question in a way that the other person will notice that you're reiterating the question back to them, or defining what the question or the subject matter really is. And so I use the technique of defining. Nomfundo, if you remember, she used the technique of, reiterating. Like, oh wow, all of us come to a stage where we need to get out of our comfort zone. That's repeating the question, And so that becomes the introduction of what you're speaking about. And that gives you a chance to think about what your authentic response is. And when you speak after thinking about it, then it comes out much better. So that's my short response to that.
Sure, that is so good. So I package my thinking and then I respond. I
Yeah.
define, I analyze what is being said by reflecting on it, and
Mm,
and then think it through. And I love what you're saying about us. Whenever we write, it seems that we write with clarity more than we speak with clarity. And
Yes.
so when we
mm,
want to speak, we have to speak as how we would think. Because when you are thinking, you are really carefully choosing your words. You are carefully,
100%.
expressing yourself. I love that. I wanted to ask you something, but I can see, Fundo, you wanted to add something there before I want to ask you something very interesting.
Okay.
I want to hear your opinions on it.
So
Please
I
go
didn't want
ahead.
to lose my thought. You mentioned something very significant as part of your interlude between the responses, and you use the example of interviews. It's not just interviews; it's even conversations in the workplace, conversations at home. Generally, in the middle of conflict, there's an anticipation of what the other person is going to say. We see that play out even in interviews. When you anticipate what a person is going to say, you almost craft a response before hearing the full question. And I think most of us have made that mistake before. And the danger there is that you speak then either over each other or you miss each other with the individual or audience you're communicating to, because there's just that missed opportunity to truly listen and not anticipate what the communication will be. And it's patience also. It's a real exercise of patience. I wanted to add that before I forget.
That's so true. That's so true. I never realized um how quickly I respond without actually listening until somebody said, when you are, in fact, it wasn't somebody, it was in a lecture. I'm trying to remember. Yeah. Anyway, but we were talking about when you are listening, effective listening is when you actually listen somebody without pre-answering them, without anything. It's blank until you actually process it, and then you answer when they are done. And you
That's correct.
and you're not necessarily wanting to jump into responding, because most of the time when you do that without checking, was this a statement they're making, is this a question, was this their own reflection, all of a sudden you answer a question when nobody was asking a question. You're becoming defensive when
Mm,
nobody was accusing, because you didn't
mm,
effectively take time to listen to what they're saying.
sure,
And it's
sure.
funny that each time we do that, or each time somebody does that to us, we feel unseen and unheard, and that is
Mm,
hurtful. Yet,
mm,
that's the first thing we do when we want to
mm,
communicate. We want to be heard and seen, and we don't necessarily give the next person a chance to be heard and seen. So thank you so much for that. I wanted to ask you something. So we're saying speaking with impact, and you guys have, I think both of you have spoken about being authentic. Um, and I want to talk about self-disclosure. There is a technique of that is buzzing in almost not every, but let me say most YouTube channels that are talking about connecting with your audience. It's when you want to connect with people, they need to see the human side of you. and,
mm,
and personal stories will help you connect. How do
mm,
you measure a personal story that will help you connect with your audience over a self-disclosure that will overwhelm your audience? So you want to be authentic, you want to speak with impact, you are aware that you must share a part of you that has, that would help you connect with the audience. But the lines can be blurry,
mm,
because sometimes that self-disclosure is encompasses a whole lot of things. And
mm.
so as a speaker, how do you know if this is the right self-disclosure or this is one of those, things that you shouldn't do.
This is a tough question you're asking, Mabongi, because none of us are influencers, and I think it's a reputable career. I highly respect, individuals that are online sharing and building and living their lives very openly, and it takes significant courage. It takes great intentionality to be able to build at that level. So I have utmost respect. Having said that, as a person that is, been or been largely exposed in the media space, I can draw briefly on that and say there is a level of consciousness that is required because as personal brands or individuals, we come with association. So that association innately of siblings, family members, children, colleagues, and by virtue of ourselves, we need to have an appreciation that whatever we put out does affect those associated with us. So it becomes then a decision an individual has to make to say, at what level am I willing to expose myself and those associated with me? And it comes with significant responsibility. You cannot take back what you expose of your children. And I've recently seen a very famous individual, the wife or former wife of a sporting personality, who did I think, a very personal post about, we exposed our children, but we've come to realize that it may have not been something that was good for them. And we've reviewed that decision and now are deciding we don't want our children in the public eye. So this is someone that has experienced the result of exposing not just themselves, but just a part of their lives, and as a consequence, their children to the world. And opinions were formed, comments were made, and those are long-standing things, especially with the advent of social media. So now, moving back to your question, over or sharing personal details versus self-disclosure. And my premise is being aware that yourself as an individual, as a personality, you don't come as a unit. There are people associated to you. So when you make decisions about things you want to put out there, be cognizant of the impact or bearing that has on other people, especially those that are associated with you, and make your decision based on that. I will not outright say things are right, things are wrong, because I'll use a personal example of people that have disclosed details around their health. And the premise of that was educational. The premise of that was to aid and create a platform of support for others. But some did things very similar to that, but outside of the correct context of reasoning and processing the impact of that. So that is my submission. And I think it's a very personal thing, but it requires a lot of wisdom and the appreciation of the impact that your decisions and exposure have on a public forum.
I really appreciate how you have broadened the scope of my question. And I love how you are highlighting that if I self-disclose as a person, it's not necessarily self-disclose. I'm actually bringing a company of people that are attached to me into the story. And that could lend in different ways. And I think it's important when we want to speak with impact to actually analyze. Now that you are saying, the outcome of it is important. If the disclosure was done right, then perhaps education would be, the outcome of that. But I've also seen where self-disclosure or personal story just didn't go right. It didn't sit well. It was overwhelming for the audience and it felt out of place.
Mm.
As if the concept of the actual talk wasn't necessarily formed well. There were no key messages that were aimed to be taken out of that. You walk away with information that this person has this history, but no lessons, no nothing to take away. And that I think takes away from, as a leader, speaking with impact. The impact is not the story that you told,
Mm.
it's what people can take from the story. And my
Mm.
question comes then to you, Baba X. How do we conceptualize what we're going to speak? How do we abstract meaningfulness on our
Mm.
stories? Because,
Mm.
I know most people have adopted the idea that, what, sad stories sell, or
Mm.
trauma stories sell, or,
Mm.
all of these
Mm.
things
Mm.
that we are using to get people hooked to our story. But how do we actually, I would say, make the story out of the story?
Mm. 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 Mm.
You know?
Such a great question. Such a really good question. I think um, so many times, Mom, cause our intentions are questioned when we get a platform to speak. What happens is some of us will have a form of identity crisis, wanting attention or wanting to fill a void, and then we'll want acceptance from other people, and then we just misuse the techniques, tools of trade that are within the public speaking space or the social, space, where, and then we want fulfillment out of, or we want to be seen out of, and our intention then becomes questioned there, because I think you made a good example of times where examples became the subject instead of the other way around. There's too much now. And so you can now draw out value from what is being said or the subject matter, because now the examples are out of place. And so that primarily happens usually when people feel like they want to be accepted or they want to be seen, and they want to fill a void using a platform that is not for that. The one side is audience, and I'll make it into a few layers. There's technical sides of public speaking or communication that speak on, you need to research your audience, know who you're speaking to. I remember a story that Ms. Nomfundo, Mrs. Klaba, spoke about in her trying to reason with her child felt unloved. That is a very personal story. But remember the audience that she was speaking to. It was professionals, it was adults, it was family people, it was, and the purpose of the community that called her to speak on the subject relate to things like that. So it's a good example for the type of audience that are there. Whereas in a case where you would say that someone will say, the child is speaking the truth. I really, it's not something you want to say in social media. So um, so knowing your audience becomes very key. Um, but also when we put our egos and attach our egos into things. And Mrs. Koza called me here to speak about entrepreneurship, public speaking, communication, and I start talking about myself more than I'm supposed to, even when it's not edifying the subject. And it happens so many times. You'll find someone called in an interview and they'll promote their book. In my book, and then that's not why we called you. It's like, no, I released the song. No, that's not what we called you. And so, um, so it's things like that. One, making sure that our intentions are very clear. Making sure that our hearts are clear. We are not trying to outshine the actual message, but you are adding value to the actual message. And that becomes, very key. So we see it a lot. I don't want to take too much of your time. I want to make an example of communities in the religious sector where more examples are made about how a person is supposed to conduct themselves, more than what's actually in the book that we're supposed to be. So it's things like that. It's like now so it becomes important to make sure that the intentions are clear. Number two, we understand, the audience that we are speaking to, so that we make relevant examples that only support the message, not examples that are there to make us seen or fill a void, or trying to identify with people, where else we are trying to support the message.
Oh, you've said it so well. I think I can actually remember times where I walked away from a speaking engagement just asking myself, did I even convey what I was, wanting to convey? Um, you know, and the idea of wanting to shine more than the message, it's a true temptation. And also the idea of I think you said, Mfundo, on the chat, bleeding publicly. I've walked away from uh, self-disclosures that shook me and I didn't get the whole idea why were they made in the speeches, but how you are explaining it, that sometimes our motives, our identity is tested when we speak, and it comes out even when we least expect, I guess, when we didn't even plan it, but because we are bleeding in public, that's the term you used. I wanna draw our conversation to a close, but I want us to close it with this. The question I asked when I stepped into to cover for you guys the day you were meant to be here, the question was, what is the a speech that you listened to that you can remember that it made so much impact in your life? You walked away and it has never left you. Can you remember a speech like that? And can you share what it was about and why did it have that impact on you?
Sure. Chivalry is still alive, but I'll go first on this one. um, so it's because your question is so it's yeah, I'm getting shivers just thinking about this memory. And I feel sad because I forgot the author or the speaker. I think it's Solomon something. Uh, he was a poet, and he stood up and said, um, "Weep not. She is not dead. She is asleep in the bosom of Jesus." Heartbroken husbands weep no more. Grief-stricken sons and daughters weep no more, for she is not dead. She is asleep in the bosom of Jesus. It's a very long speech, so I don't want to take too much of your time. But it happened around, I heard this speech very shortly after my mom passed away. And when I heard this speech, it touched me because my mom was a very devoted Christian. And she used to speak a lot about how Jesus conquered death, and he's sitting at the right hand of the Father, and how we being saved, we conquer death as well, and so we do not die, but we will rise up to glory. We transition into a new place, and so the idea of death, it takes out, sorrow, it takes out misery. And so that's the example of the speech, Mom Kwaza. Thank you so much for that
I have
question and bring
goosebumps.
that.
That would have had great impact to me too.
Mm.
What a beautiful question. Thank you so much. And there's so many beautiful speeches. I have a friend that has since passed that used to write for the former president, and of course we all know that one of the speeches that stood out, former President Thabo Mbeki, I'm an African. The essence and depth of that is one speech that stands out for me. Also, oh, Maya Angelou has so many poems specifically that call out a woman that I recall and remember. But a life-changing speech. It wasn't even a speech. It was a talk in Cape Town in 2021. It was a teaching on vision, and for the very first time in my life, how that was presented was me being confronted, and I'm a woman of faith, that vision actually comes from God. It was life changing. It was a moment where I felt myself transform and surrender to the idea that the absolute biggest aspirations that I may have come from God. Even those that I think, just with my own mind, I may be limited in, the perfected vision for my life comes from God. That assurance has transformed how I do things. It transformed who I am. Even today, imagine holding on to a word 5 years later, because there's such a confidence in it. And I think with speeches, one thing I draw from them is that indeed words are active and they're able to shape our mindsets. They are able to shape our thinking and thoughts. And that's the beauty about words that are said with meaning and depth. They do truly create.
I can imagine the person who created those speeches that you've just shared. I'm trying to imagine them a day before or a few weeks before, what they had in their minds for the audience that would
Mm.
listen to them. I can imagine
Mm.
perhaps, but is it Moses who shared, she's sleeping. Perhaps it's a story that he can relate to. Perhaps he was pouring his heart because perhaps that's where his hope was. And
Mm.
perhaps that what made the speech and the words carry more weight and carry more impact. Perhaps the lady from Cape Town, was carrying a vision that was coming to life, a vision that was unfolding before her. And that what made it, more impactful for you, that you are able to walk as though you're walking in a walkway that is unfolding, because the person who spoke those words had a vision, was seeing things, and was hoping to borrow that perspective, to borrow, that ideology to the audience. And I think that's what really makes speeches so impactful. So thank you so much for sharing your thoughts, your insights with us, your expectations. I mean, you guys are so gifted. I absolutely love listening to you guys. You are incredible speakers. You are incredible leaders. And can I just say, you've got incredible characters. You are funny. You have such a sense of humor. You are playful. You are, such a blast to be around. You have the thing. You have the vibe. And I really appreciate you making the time to talk to me. And do you have final words as we close?
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Shilbury is not yet.
Thank you so much. I'll let the winning speaker close it off with a bang. Speaking with impact really is something we should all endeavor to be, not just loose with our words, not careless. We have the authority and the responsibility to speak to generations. I always think about it profoundly to say there will be people in the future that are anchored by the words we have spoken today. It's a huge responsibility. And so, given a platform, respect it, honor it, appreciate it, be prepared for it, and really speak from a place of earnest building, speak from a place of ngicela ukusebenzisa isiZulu ngathi siphiwe umphako, you know. I feel and I believe strongly that every person or corner has something divine in them, and it's your responsibility to get it out. And speaking allows for that to happen through your life experiences, through what you've gone through. Nothing is wasted, and if you have that sense of we spoke previously about how sometimes it requires vulnerability to draw from your own experience, but also a zeal to share it, that level of zest for life and energy to say, I'm willing to build for the coming generations, and I'm going to use whatever platform, big or small, to build. So whether I'm in my workplace and I'm doing work on a daily basis, those are bricks for the future. Whether I'm in my family space, those are bricks for the future. And you will do a reference check of your life and the speeches you've made and the talks you've made from this moment forth, if you use these, principles and values we're sharing, and marvel at the depth of impact you will achieve based on the fact that you appreciate the value of the platforms you are given to speak and engage. Thank you so much, Mabongi. We appreciate this opportunity.
Oh, thank you, man. Thank you so much. Yes, Baba X. Award-winning speaker.
Yes.
What
Yes,
a
yes.
I don't know
No
what
point.
she's doing to you, but I feel the pressure on your behalf.
Exactly. In closing, ma'am, I would say before we develop to be effective as professionals, we first and foremost need to develop to be effective as human beings. Before we develop to be effective, powerful parents, leaders in the different aspects of our life that we exist in, first and foremost, we need to be effective and powerful as human beings. It is not our work that makes us better, but we make our workplace better. It is not being a parent that makes you a great parent. It is you being a great person that makes you, a great parent. So water the garden of your heart, the garden of your spirit, the garden of your mind well, so that when we get into the marketplace, get into our homes, get into our professions, then we ooze out the goodness that is truly our identity. Thank you so much, Mom Koza. This was a plum pleasing pleasure. Thank you,
Wow.
ma'am.
Yo, the award winning just dropped the mic.
Goosebumps. Goosebumps.
Goosebumps. Oh my God.
But
Thank you so much. Thank you so
Mic
much.
drop.
Thank you so much for everyone who's going to be watching this later. We appreciate you. We'll see you again in 2026.